thought I would do something a little bit different today. I will be doing a tier list of the Monster Train 2 units, uncommon banner units. So this is only the units that are part of banners. They have the blue banner on them, and they are only the uncommon ones, so none of the rares. I think that rares are kind of more run defining, more niche, and I also just generally have a little bit less experience with them, so I feel less confident ranking them. Whereas now I have, let's see, 360 hours in Monster Train 2. I have done one. Well, let's open it up and I can show you, just so you can get a gauge for what kind of, where I'm speaking from. I'm not a pro. I'm not the best player in the world, but I do have all the crowns. I have recently been working on no reset Cov10T runs. I did reset these, but I consider those losses. I have been winning most of my Cov10T runs with no resets. Not all, as you can see. But, so I'm not the best player in the world. But, I like to think that I at least have some idea of what I'm talking about here. So I just thought this would be fun to do a tier list, get my thoughts out there of how I feel about these units. And I always love this, type of tier list content. I know it's considered slop content or least common denominator content, but I eat this shit up. I really love it. I love talking about this stuff. I love getting my thoughts out there and articulating them. So without further ado, let's dive in here. These aren't really in any particular order. I'm just going to go in any order. I will say that I don't think that there are any F tier units in this game. In Monster Train 1 Last Divinity, I would have said that there were a couple of F tier units. In this game, I don't think there's any units that are truly terrible. I just think that there's just D tier units. There's a few D tier units, which are units that I think are just kind of bad. Let me open up my reference here. The one I was working on earlier, just to see. Yeah, so I think there's some units that are just kind of bad, but definitely workable. And what better unit to start us off than the Awoken Hollow? A unit that is kind of bad, but still can be workable. I think in the original Monster Train he was a fine scaling solution. A lot of the time fine in the sense that he was kind of your only choice when you were playing Awoken. Awoken is a clan that's kind of hurting for offensive scaling, and that hasn't changed in Monster Train 2. What has changed in Monster Train 2 is that there's a lot more incoming damage onto your units, and the Awoken clan just does not really keep up very well with all of the incoming damage. Their healing is just not enough. Regen is just not good enough. This guy is a big tank, and he still just dies in 2 hits to Dominion Seraph. He just still dies in 2 hits. He dies almost immediately still. Not only that, but he just doesn't do that much. The offensive scaling it was barely enough to get by in Monster Train 1. In Monster Train 2, I don't know if they buffed him by 1 maybe. I think they buffed him by 1. But it's still just not enough. He's not affected by dualism. He just dies very fast. His scaling is slow. But you can do it. You can use this unit. It can be a scaling solution. It can be a little tank. If you find some kind of daze or something for Seraph or something like that, or if you have a holdover Unleash the Wildwood or something like that, some outrageous healing amounts, he can definitely work. It's just that I don't really prefer this unit. I really would rather do something else. if I'm doing Awoken. I think Awoken Hollow is just a pretty prime example of why I think Awoken is the worst clan in Monster Train 2. The healing just doesn't cut it, really. It's just not good enough, and they're lacking offensive scaling. His offensive scaling is just not that great. But again, he can work. Next up, we have the Alpha Fiend. Alpha Fiend is a unit that was buffed and changed. I'm going to put him in the A tier. He is a powerhouse now. He wants multi-strike. He wants maybe smidge, but not always. You can give him a large stone and just have him sit on his own floor. Just put him bottom or something and have him just kind of passively scale himself. You do need to find a way to keep him alive if you're going to do that. But, he's just a unit who scales himself very fast. I think the kind of set and forget passive scaling is really desirable in this game, because you really want to play on multiple floors, and splitting your attention and resources between multiple floors is always hard. So it's nice to have a guy who can just kind of do his own thing and just scale on his own. He's a really solid unit. I'm leaving him in the A tier instead of S because for one, he does need some time to ramp up. He can't do it all by himself. He is 3 space, so he does want some kind of ascend for overstacking or a smidge stone. And the other thing is that he is a little bit fragile to start. He's a little fragile. Not terribly so, but his health isn't like super high for a unit who is taking up so much space and also costs 2 Ember. That's another thing too. He's a pretty high investment unit that definitely can scale very well, but his starting stats are quite low for the amount of resources you have to put into him. Still, a very good unit. Very nice and welcome buffs for him. Next up we have the Armor Shark. I am blanking on his name right now. I'm going to put him in the C tier. For some reason he wasn't buffed at all, even though he was like one of the worst Stygian units already. I don't know why he didn't get any kind of buffs. I guess because he's affected by dualism now. But yeah, he's an interesting unit. I mean, he's definitely welcome in the early game. He's definitely going to be a huge wall. And just kind of having a huge wall tank is like something in Monster Train 2 that I think is more welcome than it was in Monster Train 1. Just having a tank that can sit in front of like something like a sweeper or something like that is like, it's fine. But the thing is, he just doesn't do that much. Like, it's still not really doing that much, even though his role, like, he's good at his role, but he's just not really doing a whole lot, I think. He's basically no attack, so he basically provides very little value to Relentless other than just providing an extremely huge wall. But in that case, it's like you can kind of just not play him and do some other kind of offensive or defensive scaling. Like, you can get an Incant Armor 2 upgrade on one of your units. I know that's not quite as good, but and there's just a lot of defense in Stygian naturally. They have a lot of days, a lot of sap. They're a very defensive clan normally, so it just kind of feels like a lot of the time that this Armor Shark is just not necessary. He's just kind of overkill, and he's taking up 2 space on your floor for not that much value. But he's not a unit that I hate seeing in my opener or anything like that. He's like, okay, I'll get through the early rings because I'll have so much durability on my floor. Except if you're against Spike's boss in Ring 2, that's a different story. But he's like a fine unit, but he's one that I usually am not going to add to my deck if I can help it. Next up, the Astrologer. I'm also going to put Astrologer in C tier. Unfortunately, I just don't think this guy is doing quite enough. He is a heavily scaling unit, and, of course, I've won with him before. You've given him multi-strike and a smidge, or 2 multi-strikes, get a couple of them duped, and, do a bunch of mood cycle. It's like, okay, great. But that's a lot of investment. know, he doesn't scale passively. He does actually, because there's the passive moon cycle, but he really needs a lot of moon cycle to get going. And his base stats are just very low. 10 health is so fragile. It's like a lot of time you're going to need add health to him. There is some armor solutions in Luna, of course, so, you know, not always, but he only scales by 5 attack on moon cycle. I'd say in like an ideal moon cycle scenario, you have like an endless meddler. So you're like summoning the meddler for 1 moon cycle, you're clicking the button on meddler for another moon cycle, and you're getting the natural moon cycle for every turn. Now that is 3 moon cycle. So that is 15 attack. Compare that to like even something like Alpha Fiend that's already right here. Alpha Fiend's just getting 15 attack just by attacking once. You put a multi-strike on him, he gets 30 attack. And you didn't need to spend an Ember on an Endless Meddler every single turn, taking up a draw and an Ember to do that. And he also has more health to start. Yes, he is 2 Ember. Yes, he is 3 space. I know it's not 1-to-1, but to me, it's just, I would just so much rather have the Alpha Fiend because he's just doing his own thing. And this guy needs so much investment, and it's still just not even that strong. It can be, of course. You can get like Lunacy and stuff like that. You know, you can give him the Luna Cycle Staff to kind of help out the initial early scaling or early attack value, because he also does have that problem where he starts out with very low attack and he takes a while to get going. But yeah, I mean, he's a capable carry unit, but I think you can just usually do better than the Astrologer. Next up we have the Avenger. I am going to put Avenger in our first S. I didn't really think that he was for a while, but the more and more I play with this guy, the more and more I just think he's so good. Just a really, really rock-solid tank unit. He really likes to have dualism. He really likes to have large stone, titanite, even endless. You know, he takes a lot of upgrades very well. He just does so much work to soften up waves in a way, in an indirect way, by putting melee weakness on everything. It just doubles. He basically, like, in a weird way, like, adds a ton of damage. He's almost like a sweeper in a very weird and indirect way, but he's also a huge tank. This guy's very versatile in what you can do with him. You can stick him on his own floor and just kind of have him chill, or you can just put him as your frontliner and just have him tank for everything. But yeah, he's very multifaceted, multi-purpose unit. The only awkward thing about him is that he eats up his own melee weakness on the front minion if he doesn't have quick. And I don't really like putting quick on him. It seems like a waste of an upgrade slot when he takes so many other things very well. So he does a lot of the time eat up his own melee weakness on the tank, but he's just providing so much value, especially like bosses. He's a great frontliner, just naturally very tanky. I don't know, like from my experience, he just performs extremely well. Really like having this unit. Very strong and relentless into waves. Very versatile. Takes a lot of upgrades well. That's what you like to see in like an S tier unit. Next up we have the Wickless Baron. I am actually also going to put Wickless Baron in S tier. This is a unit that got way better also for Monster Train 1. He scales, you know, he's at +5/+5 now for Harvest when he was at +3 before. So he is now basically equal to a self-infused Baron from Monster Train 1. And Smidge Stone is now an upgrade too. So you can smidge him as well as multi-strike him and fit a bunch of them on the floor and they just kind of go crazy. you don't, because of the nature of this game, it's like one of the big problems, of course, and it's still a problem with him today, is he also does still take a little bit to get off the ground, but he's so low investment, one Ember, you just plop them down, plop a couple of them down, and they can kind of go to work. But anyway, one problem was in the original Monster Train was that he took a long time to start scaling. And that's not good when you only have one working floor. Monster Train 2, you're going to have 2 working floors at least the majority of the time. So, because you have 2 working floors, you don't need to worry about him immediately clearing all the waves by himself. You know, not himself. There's going to be like 2 or 3 of them you have on the floor. But you don't need to worry about all of them clearing the floor because you're going to have whatever else you're doing that will take care of the rest. He can just sit back and relax, and again, just kind of passively scale. All you need to do is every turn throw a dreg on his floor, throw an endless tomb on his floor, or a couple dregs, and he gets scaling pretty quickly. I'd say the only disadvantage to him now is that, like, you can't, I think tombs in general got a little bit worse, so tombs are a little bit harder to take now because you can't infuse them. So that's the only thing. I don't know. Maybe he's A tier. Like, maybe he's not S. I think he's like a low S, though. He does take a little while to scale, but he's super low investment and very, you know, set and forget kind of unit that you just set up a floor of a bunch of them and they just get to work. Then they scale very quickly. Very good relentless units early on in the game. Even in like the first few rings, he gets out of control stats 115 basically, or 125, whatever it is, because he starts with 10 more health, right? So he'll go to like 115, 125, even like the Archeon fight. He'll just be like crazy huge and just like soloing the game at that point. Like I said, the only problem is that you are going to need to find something else to do to kind of supplement his slower scaling, and once the game kind of gets into the late game. But, I mean, he just solves so many problems on his own, and he just scales so fast and so freely that he's got to be S tier, I think. Low S tier maybe, but I think he's got to be S tier. Next up we have the Battle Dancer. I'm going to put A for Battle Dancer. He's not as universal. Obviously, I think his problem is that you don't always get shift. I mean, that's kind of it. You know, the S tier, I think, is kind of units that, like, I will generally always welcome if I see them. Like, there's very few situations in which I'd see them and I need a unit, and, like, I wouldn't take an S tier unit. The A tier units are, like, ones that are, like, there's certain situations definitely where I wouldn't want them. Battle Dancer is definitely in that category, where if you don't get Just Cause, or you don't have, like, shifts, like Rising Rage, and on Holdover, Spell Chain, or whatever, or Talos shifting, and a Steadfast Crusader, you know, something like that. You know, like, there's situations where you just don't really get a whole lot of shift, so you just won't use the Battle Dancer. But when you do, it's an extremely strong unit. You know, Valor 3, it scales its own defense and offense. It's like sort of like a Siren of the Sea in a way. It likes all the same upgrades. You know, it likes the smidge, it likes the multi. Same with the Baron. You know, it likes to be that kind of carry unit that you just dupe a few of them and just start shifting around and going crazy, and they get scaling really fast. The only real problem with them in theory is that it's a very fragile unit. So you have to be careful, because if there is incoming damage on the floor and you shift him into the front, he only has 14 base health. So if you're against Seraph and you shift him into the front, he's dead. Like, the armor doesn't kick in immediately. That's kind of the only problem with Valor, is that you do have to get a turn to actually accumulate the armor first. So sometimes you do maybe need to just add some health to these guys, just some base health, a plus 20 health upgrade in the shop. which is unfortunate because they really do like to see, you know, multi and smidge or multi, and so adding a base health never really feels great, but it's fine. It's still a very strong unit. It doesn't. Another thing is that even it doesn't quite get to like super crazy levels of attack usually, in a way that like a Baron does. I mean, it kind of can actually. It gets to about where a Baron is usually, but the problem is that you have to invest in it. You have to play all of your shift cards. Whereas the Baron, it's like, okay, you can just play your Endless Tomb, which you're going to play anyway, or you play your Dregs out, which are free, and it's like it's very minimal investment. With the Battle Dancer, it's like you have to kind of actually invest in the shift cards and like actually play stuff. You have to actually be working on that floor. But it's still a very solid bread and butter carry unit that the Banished has. Next up we have Brandon Warrior. I don't know. I don't actually have a ton of experience using this guy. He's been like okay for me when I've used him. He does need to get the slays. I'm not sure. He might be D tier, to be honest with you. A lot of his appeal in the early Monster Chain 1 was his infusion on like a sweeper or something. But now it's like, I don't know, he just doesn't really do that much on his own. He's very low base health, so it's like you do need to get some durability into him. I do think you really need some base durability, because one thing that sucks about Hellhorn, and in a similar way that Awoken feels it, is that the armor, the defensive game plan from Hellhorn is just not as good. It just doesn't really hold up super well. I think that for Hellhorn, and the thing that really separates them from Awoken, and the thing that makes Hellhorn better than Awoken in this game, is that Rage very much still holds up. Rage is still very good. So they have a very good offensive game plan. But their defensive game plan is very shaky. And when that's true, and you have 8 base health, you know, it is better than it was. He was at 5 on release, so they did buff him. But even at 8, it's like, I feel like you really need to add some base health to him. And then he really wants multi-strike, so that's kind of it, right? You kind of have to give him plus 20 and multi-strike. And then it's like, okay, maybe he's getting 2 slays out of that somehow. And he's giving Rage, what is it, 8 or 10 a turn? I mean, that's good, sure. But that's like an ideal scenario. I don't know. Like, you do need to still find some other scaling game plan for him, aside from his own passive scaling. Because he actually does need to get to the point where he can kill things. So, I don't know. I don't think he's very good. I've had some decent luck with him so far, but I usually skip him. He usually just doesn't have a place. He just doesn't do enough. He's just not cutting it, I think. He's just not cutting it. Okay, next up, we have the Stygian. I'm just going to do both of these Stygian Sweepers in A tier. You know, same thing as the first game. They say the word sweep on them. That's already enough to put them in the A tier, and that's where they're going. I think they were both buffed slightly. I think Siliphyte now is 20 health, which she had 10 before, and now Cold Kaylee has 15 when she had 10. So they both are a little bit more durable, which is very welcome. And they're more feasible to kind of get their upgrades, or I mean their effects off now, because you do actually kind of want to play these bottom now instead of top floor. So getting that Frostbite out, getting that Spell Weakness out on the first floor is a lot more valuable. Yeah, so I'm just trying to think of what my justification is, because I think that a lot of people maybe would put them in the S tier. But I think the distinction is that they're not... It feels like they're not totally universal, and I think the reason why is because you can't really completely divorce the unit from the clan. The problem with Stygian and these units being in Stygian is that they have no game plan to actually scale them on their own. So a lot of the time they might just be doing their base damage pretty much, and not much more. You know, you give them a large stone maybe, and a multi-strike, and then they're hitting for 35, 36, whatever, which is just enough to take out the backliners, which is good. That's very good if you get that. But they're not solving... They're not... I should say they're not super universal. Because that again, that's kind of a requirement that you need to get exactly like a large stone multi-strike, or like an attack and a multi-strike. And you need to put them bottom, and you need to find a way to keep them alive on bottom. I guess you don't need to put them on bottom, but a lot of the time that's how it ends up working out. And Stygian just has no natural way of scaling them. That's it. That's the only reason why I have them in A tier. I still very much appreciate having them most of the time, and they usually are part of my game plan when I see them, but I don't think they're like the super universal, like I always want this type of unit. But, you know, they say sweep on them, which is enough to put them in the A tier. Next up, we have the Cluster Colonel. He is also going in the A tier. It's a weird unit, because it's one of those, the few units in the game that's sort of almost like an engine unit. It's not a unit on its own, if that makes any sense. Like, he himself is not his own unit. He's an engine for other units. So he does rally for like Spore Launcher and Boleet, Rally Boleet, Anoki, and Enchantrell, you know, things like that. He's also just a very solid, capable unit on his own in the early game. You know, he's a nice unit to start with because he just makes a huge mushroom stack, which is enough to just win the game in the first 3 rings. You know, even just having a big mushroom stack, even if you don't have any synergy with it, is enough to just win the early game, which is very appreciated. I'd say that the main problem, well, one more good thing too about him, I'll say, is that he doesn't need any upgrades, which I guess almost kind of maybe a bad thing too, because like he isn't really improved by upgrades. He's not really improvable. Like he's what he says on the box, you know, it's just resolve spawn 4. That's what he does. And he does that. And that's it. So there's no way to make him better, but it's also nice that you don't need to actually invest anything into him, and he still does his job. I'd say the only thing that keeps him out of S tier is that, to be honest, most rally synergies in Underlegion just aren't that good. Like, other than maybe like Enchantrell, I think most of like the rally stuff is just not doing that much. Yeah, you have Boleet. Okay, Boleet is like, but there's other ways to rally Boleet, his starter card for one. A lot of the time you can get Boleet up to such crazy numbers that are unnecessary. And it's like the Cluster Colonel's just kind of overkill for that. But it's certainly good with it. I'm not saying it's bad with it. I'm just saying it's not like super necessary a lot of the time. Anoki, we'll get to Anoki, but it's not, I don't think it's that crazy valuable to just get more regen and hell. I don't think it's that important. And then there's Spore Launcher, which is a great unit, obviously, great rally synergy. The problem is that its interaction with the rally, or the resolves interaction with that rally is very weird. The rally on resolve triggers after decay triggers on the enemies. So the problem with using him with a Spore Launcher is that he will not actually cause the enemies to take decay damage from his spawns on that turn. They'll only take the damage on the next turn, which is pretty annoying, actually. It's really annoying that it works that way. It makes it very clunky and awkward, and I almost kind of feel like if you're doing a Spore Launcher thing, like you'd rather not really rely on a cluster kernel is always welcome, but you'd rather not like rely on that, and you'd rather have some other way to rally. It's just a weird interaction. It's good. I mean, it's definitely welcome, don't get me wrong, especially against like bosses and stuff, but it's a weird interaction that is clunky. Another thing too about him is that he does cost 2 Ember, and he does take up 2 space. So he's not like free in a way that other engine cards like we'll get to her, but something like Lunar Priestess is like 1 Ember and 1 space, whereas this guy is 2 Ember and 2 space. So he's a little bit higher investment, and I think that his payoff is like not super high ceiling. But, I mean, he's still such a solid unit in the early game. And he does always help any rally synergy. I hope that made sense. Crucible. Oops. I dropped him. There he is. Where are you going, Crucible? Where's this Collector? Where are you going? I think you're going in this C tier. Yeah. And let's get your twin in here too. They're both about C tier. I think that Umbra is actually better, a lot better in this game than it was in Last Divinity. Most of their units are better. Gorging is better. Morsels are better. The only thing is that I think these 2 dogs, these Lifesteal Dog, Damage Shield Dog, Crucible Warden, and Collector, I think that they didn't really get any better. I think that they're the least desirable Umbra units in general. They're just not doing a whole lot. You know, they're very good relentless solutions, and that's kind of why I have them in C rather than D. Is because they'll carry you through the early game for sure. Like, they'll get you there. But they still kind of want to have, like, they don't really scale offensively, so they're just kind of sitting around and taking a beating and not really doing anything. Which is, you know, as much as defense really is important in Monster Train 2, they're just pretty low impact units as the run goes on. They're just not doing that much. They're good at killing bosses in the early game, so I never hate seeing them. But they're just not that important. They're not doing all that much. Not much else to say. Let's go with the Magma Cultist, our first B tier unit, finally. Magma Cultist is, I think, he's another engine unit, right? And he's kind of a happy medium. He's 2 Ember, but he's only 1 space. And he is the engine for Pyrogel. I think he is basically, you know, Pyrogel is kind of weird in that I think Pyrogel is very strong, but it's not something that you can really build around unless you have Magma Cultist. That's it. Magma Cultist is like the only strategy I think that really enables a Pyrogel run. I think you can definitely use him. I think the 2 Ember is kind of to discourage playing multiple of them, because it gets maybe a little bit too silly if you're just doing, like, you know, he has dualism and you have 2 of them or 3 of them, and you're doing 4 or 6 Pyrogel for incant, and then you're doing like 4 or 5 incants. It's like just crazy damage easily. So I guess I get why he's 2 Ember. Most of the time you only really need 1 of him though, and he's doing what he needs to do. He's usually low investment unit. You just kind of stick on the floor. You can put him on your working floor and just incant. He just adds in a bunch of extra damage for pretty minimal floor space, or minimal floor space in one space, the minimum. He enables the Pyrogel completely. But the reason why he's in B tier is just because he's not really getting there on his own. He does need to be paired with something, or have some justification for being on the floor with whatever else you're doing. You need to be casting spells with him and incanting on his floor. You need to make sure he's the one doing he's the one on the floor that you're doing stuff on. He's a little bit like reliant on like dualism and stuff, and it's really the only upgrade he's looking for. I just think he's a little bit more niche, but he's still very strong when he's good. When he's very good, he's very good. But he's just a little bit more niche, I would say. And we have Demon Fiend. I think Demon Fiend is also a B tier unit. He's a unit that's very good to see in your opener. You know, he'll take care of the early game by himself. He tramples now. You just need to play him on his own. You'll always have 4 Ember to start with. If you start with him in your opener, he's just a big guy who's just doing tons of damage, trampling, taking care of all the waves in the first couple of combats for you. He's not a unit that I really like taking later on. I only really like starting with him or taking him maybe in the first ring banner. Because he's very expensive, and he's a weird one in that like you kind of got to invest a lot in him to make him scale up to the difficulty of the game, but at that point you're better off investing into something else. Because he's just a single striking unit. I mean, you can definitely make it work. He says trample, so if you just give him a bunch of rage and then multi-strike, it's like he can definitely get there. He can be your soul carry. He can be. But usually when you have like a bunch of rage and you find a multi-strike upgrade, it's just like you'd just rather would give that to something else that's cheaper. But still, he's a very good unit in the early game. He fulfills his role very well, which I think is basically what the B tier kind of comprises of. Role players. More niche role players. Demonic Fledgling. I will say I'm going to say C tier for him also. He's a weird one. He gains Valor 1 on strike, which is basically like nothing. It's just not anything. The main thing about him is that he gains Rage 4 on shift, which is 8 attack. So that's a lot. You know, Valor 3 on shift for the Battle Dancer, he's only gaining 3 attack. You know, Demonic Fledgling is gaining 8 attack. Demonic Fledgling's problem is that he doesn't really gain any defense. He's very fragile, and you want to shift him, which basically comprises of putting him in the front of your floor often. That becomes a problem when he doesn't have any defense. So he's a very weird, unwieldy unit. Again, I have made him work, but he's just not really that dependable, not really that reliable. He creates so many conundrums and headaches, and like, how are you going to keep him alive? That is just like generally not really worth it or not really feasible a lot of the time. But you can make it work. I have done it before. It's just a lot harder to get there. Next up we have Paraffin Enforcer. Paraffin Enforcer, he'll go in the A tier. In Monster Train 1, I think he was definitely a contender for best unit in the game in Monster Train 1. Nowadays, he's not as good. I think the loss of infusions kind of really hurt him. He really wanted to be self-infused or with a draft or something, or even onto a sweeper. You know, he really liked all that stuff. Now you can't infuse him. With that being said, though, his effect is still so good that he's still a great unit. I still think he's a very good unit. Maybe not as universal anymore. Is the only thing. It's just a little bit harder to get it working because of the lack of infusions. It's harder to get him to start with like burnout. A lot of the time too, I would even just infuse him into like a Lady of the House or something, or put a Lady of the House into him, and it's like a great way to like kick off the burnout if you don't get like the draft infusion or something. But now it's like I find the most unwieldy part about him is just getting that initial burnout on him, because he wants to scale himself too, but he doesn't start with any burnout. So that's kind of his big problem now. Still, though, I think he's kind of helped by the fact that you can kind of just, in some ways, he can kind of be set and forget, and you can just put him on a floor, give him some initial burnout, stick him behind like a Lady of the Reformed, and then put a bunch of dregs behind him. And then it's kind of like a passive scaling floor. It's just kind of doing its own thing. It's just scaling. That's really nice that you can just kind of do that now. Overall, I do think he was kind of hurt by a lot of Monster Chain too, but he was so good before that he's still quite good. Let's do Amoris Anoki. I think Amoris Anoki is C tier. This unit is just not, again, it's just a case of, she's just not really doing that much that you really need. You know, giving health and regen to your entire floor is usually just not that valuable. It only really exists, I think, as a means to, like, keep you alive against something like the Sweepers on Savagery Seraph, you know, or something like that. It's just a way to keep your Spore Launcher or something like that from just dying. But it fills a very narrow role that's like very hypothetical and not super necessary, or not that it's not super necessary, it's just that it's an uncommon scenario. It's mostly just not needed. It's not even really that great early game. It's pretty poor stats. It's 10-10. Usually you don't really rally quite enough to actually get like a super meaningful amount of health and regen in the early game. I just think she's a pretty low impact unit that the ideal scenario is just not that doing that much, or not really like that common. She definitely has her place. Like she has been a critical part of my runs occasionally, but like not very often at all, like pretty infrequently. It's usually a unit that I really just don't really like to see. But not bad. Not a bad unit. She's good at what she does. She's just not that useful most of the time. It very much in contrast to Firebrand. Kind of the sister to Avenger. Although I would say I think Firebrand, you know, this tier list is not in order, but just honorary. Firebrand is even better than Avenger. Firebrand, if you can give Firebrand dualism and Titanite, she can like solo the game. You know, you can give her a wing shield. She just clears backliners, and you put the blood-soaked arena down there. She gets even more. You get some of the artifacts that give you more armor for your valor stacks, or give you more valor whenever it's applied, you know, stuff like that. And it's just like, there's so many ways to just get her to be like a crazy, like, one-man show, one-woman show, you know, just a machine, just completely soloing the game. Of course, she doesn't solve all the problems of the game, right? She doesn't generally kill entire waves or anything, but she is going to kill the boss for you. She's going to do a ton of work and just kill the boss. It's the same story as Avenger, where you can just have her sitting on her own floor and do her own thing, or you can put her as the frontliner on her floor. But she's a total beast. I mean, just stays alive forever. You know, I said Titanite Dualism. Takes large stone as well. Even multi-strike can be good. It's just a unit you always want to see. Like, you're always taking it whenever you see this unit. It always has a place. It's always going to do something for you. Yeah, one of my favorites. Both of these banished tanks are just super strong units. And now we have a Pincushion. I'm going to say I'm going to say 8 here. Sort of similar to Battle Dancer, where it's like, it's not totally universal. It's just that when it is good, it's very, very strong. The only problem with him, I'd say, is that he's very weak early. If you start with him in your opener, he's just like a 6/6, right? Or whatever. I mean, is he a 12/12 now? They buffed him, right? Either way, his stats aren't really that impressive. But I think that in general, both of the champions for Lazarus are good enough that you'll get through the early game, even if you start with him. And both of the starter cards as well, even if you don't have the champions. I think they're both very good. That, you know, his weak stats aren't that big of a deal in the early game. You know, you can definitely have a hard time. But he's not super dire to see in your opener. But he can get very out of control. He can get very high, 150, 150. And he can be a huge carry for you. You slap multi-strike and smidge on him. Or he can even just be a tank. You can just put a Titanite on him or something. And, you know, he can just be a huge tank. You know, he's a pretty versatile and flexible unit. That can do a lot of things. He's a great replicate array target. Good carry, good tank. She's kind of good all-rounder. Next up we have the Guildmonger. This is going to be just a generally fine unit. He gives you eggs. I like eggs. Eggs are money and artifacts. He's not the best source of eggs, but he's really good with Endless, with Reform, with Reanimate. And his stats are like not terrible. You know, 10-30. I don't mind starting with him. You know, he's usually good enough to get you through the early game if he's your starter. But he's not doing much after a while. He's just kind of a light economy unit. I'm never sad to see him. He does his role well. But he's not like winning you the run ever, really. Makeshift Golem is also going into the B tier. This is a unit that he's one of the 2 Lazarus tanks. I think he's worse. He has less natural armor that he gains, and he's less natural health. But on the other side of the coin, he's only 2 space and he's only 1 ember. I still do value the overall tankiness of the hulking mass more, because he's just so much more durable. I think having a more durable front line is more important than AoE durability. And it's another reason why like Anoki is like C tier. You know, it's definitely valuable in some situations against like Corruption Seraph or against Savagery Seraph to have some AoE defense. I just think in general for most of the game it's more important to have front tankiness. But the nice thing about this guy is that, you know, his 1 space and 2 space and 1 ember versus the Hulking Mask's 2 Ember and 3 Space cannot be understated. You know, it is pretty significant. It's just that I think that Hulking Mask does a way better job at being a tank, being that huge frontliner that's just super hard to chew through. Give him Titanite, Dualism, reanimates. Even just the shop reanimate is good on these guys too, by the way. They're both pretty good tanks. I'm even kind of debating putting him in the S tier. I don't know. It's funny because if you had asked me when I was like maybe halfway through my Titan kills what I think the best unit in the game is, uncommon banner unit, I probably would have told you Hulking Mass. I'm a lot cooler on him these days. I'm not like super crazy about him anymore. And that's mostly because I find that there's a lot of runs, and this is true for the Golem too, where I just don't really need it. Like, Lazarus is a clan that has so many, I shouldn't say so many, but reanimate. There's a lot of reanimate. To the point where it's like, having a tank even a lot of the time, it's not even that super necessary. Or you have some other tank from another clan, and just giving reanimate is like good enough. You know? I think there's just a lot of times where I find myself just kind of skipping like Hulking Mass and Makeshift Golem because I just don't need them. I just don't feel like they're that important. But they're still really good tanks. They can eat hits. They take like faulty body and stuff like that really well. They're definitely good when they're good. They're both pretty good units. And these are both pretty good units as well. Well, I guess they're kind of different, so let's talk about them separately. Greed Dragon, just bread and butter unit for Fireborn. Get your eggs, get a giant unit who's just going to carry you. You know, he takes like almost every shop grade well. He can take Titanite, he can take a multi-strike, he can take a quick, he can take a smidge, he can take a endless, which is really good because he gets his battle cry twice. You know, when you play him the second time, he gets it again, the whole summon. Like he's 100, 100, and then he becomes 100, or like 180, 180, or whatever it is. When you play him the second time, you can like elevator him up. Like you play him on bottom floor, he dies to the boss. You replay him on middle floor, he dies again, and you know, you like elevator him up. But most of the time, to be honest with you, I just kind of give him multi-strike or smidge or something like that, and just have him be, and just dupe him. Like I just have like 4 of them, and just have them be my carries. And they're just 4 big dudes that are just wailing on the enemies. He takes like basically every single shop upgrade except for dualism. I think that's like a really underrated aspect of what makes a unit powerful is like how many shop upgrades they take. And the fact that Greed Dragon can use everything except for dualism is really important. There's so many runs I've had where I just had a Greed Dragon, just duped him 3-4 times, and I just won, and then that was it. Like that's it. That's the run. I just have a bunch of these Greed Dragons, and I just win. You know, he's even like just not that bad in the early game. You know, even if you have 0 Dragon Sword, he's like, he has pretty respectable 20-35 stats. It's pretty respectable. So he's not even bad when you don't have any eggs. The only real downside with him is that he does cost 2 Ember, so it does kind of discourage making a ton of them, but even so, you can just wait on him and play him later. And there are theoretically also runs that just don't get any eggs. You just don't find like any egg generation. It's not common at all, but yeah, it sometimes happens. It's the only thing kind of keeping him fair. He's 3 space, he's 2 Ember. You know, he is a big, high investment unit, but he's worth it. And same thing with Hothead. I think Hothead might actually be the best unit in the game. Uncommon. He is a unit that says sweep and quick, you know. I hear a lot of people chattering, or a lot of chatter about test subject alpha. It's like, oh my god, he says he's a 2 Ember 510 that just says quick on him and sweep. Well, what if I told you that there was a 2 Ember 520, so it has double the health, 10 more health, that also is the same amount of space, and he also says sweep and quick, but he also says multi-strike. That's what Hothead is. He has sweep, quick, and multi-strike. The only problem with him is that he has 2 cooldown on his ability, but that is so rarely ever any kind of problem. There are so many ways to get around that. You can get the attuned manacles, right? When you summon a well-produced cooldown. You can get the one that charges your ability when you damage your own unit. You can get the Mind Cage, of course. That's the most common way. You can get the Tome of Contracts. You can get the Pyroborn Spike. You can even just dupe him and just have 2 of them sitting bottom and then just alternate when you use them. You know, there's so many ways around it. This guy can just... So often, this guy just literally solos the game for me. He just solos the entire game. You just give him any kind of attack scaling, and he just goes to work, man. He just auto-clears waves by himself. All you need to do is click his button every turn. And you don't even need to give him crazy shop upgrades. You just give him plus 20 health, plus 14 attack. That's it. Like, you can just give him that. Or you can, you know, you give him a large stone, you give him a Titanite. You know, he likes those, but otherwise, like, he's fine with just, like, basic attack and health upgrades. That's, like, good enough most of the time. Although, you know, you really do prefer, like, large stone or Titanite, but he's such a low investment unit. If you can find any kind of, like, intrinsic or deployable cooldown reduction, you only really need one of them most of the time. And you just need some scaling. Even his floor is like he's just kind of being a sweeper on the bottom floor. That's like the worst case scenario, is that he's kind of just being like a regular sweeper. Best case scenario is that he just solos the entire game, which is usually what happens. Yeah, really crazy unit. This guy, I'm going to say C tier. He does have innate multi-strike, which is cool, but same problem as Brandon Warrior. Whereas he lacks the scaling, he has the extra strike. I think maybe he's a little bit better, just because it's easier for him to... I think the Rage is easier to access through alternative means than multi-strike is, if that makes any sense. So the reason why I think he's better than Brandon is just because he already has the harder part of what he wants to do. Multi-strike and a lot of rage. They both want to do that. Horned Warrior already has the multi-strike. That's it. I still don't think this is like a great unit. It's still very frail. It still really wants health or large stone or something. It still needs more multi-strike, I think, but it's like a capable carry unit. You can absolutely win with it. Yeah, not much else to say, I think. Next we have the Titan Sentry. I do think he's S still. You know, he takes Endless very well, but also Dualism and Titanite and Large Stone and Health. You know, he turns on a lot of shop upgrades like Endless. It's nice when you see Endless in the shop and you can actually use it on something. That's something that makes the Shark really strong. He almost kind of acts like a weird sweeper in a way. He does kind of really want Dualism. I mean, honestly, and Endless. Like, he kind of really does want Dualism and Endless, but it's not completely necessary. You can just give him Endless, or you can just give him Dualism, Titanite, or Large Stone or something, and he'll at least put it in the work for a while. You can also just stick him in the front of your floor as your tank in the early game, and he can do work there too. Just a very versatile unit again. I think not much has changed from Monster Train 1. He's still a very strong unit. I think he's a little bit worse now. Like, he's not like super crazy good like he was. I think he's like bottom of S tier now. He just dies more easily. Like, I feel like he is really very dependent on Endless. He dies very easily, but still, he's still very useful. Even his floor, his worst case scenario is like he's still useful. Then we have the Awoken Sweepers. They're going in the same place as the Stygian ones for a lot of the same reasons, really. Is that, like, the actual offensive scaling available in the clan is just not very good. But they're still really nice to see because they say sweep. That's it. Alloyed Construct, I think maybe going to B. It's a little bit less reliable, and even when he is, you know, good, he's not like that good. He's not going to do it all on his own. He's not going to be a one-man show. He's just going to put in solid work. But if you have some like planks and you don't find much morsel generation, you can't really use him. If you have Shade Splitters, then he's like a pretty good carry unit. But the problem is that he's only himself. He wants to be alone on the floor due to the nature of morsels, and unless you got a crazy Ember Drain package or like crazy Shroud Spike stuff, he's not gonna like scale that crazily. So he's just like a solid like finisher unit. But he's a bit limited in what he can do on his own, I would say. Next up, we have Lady of the House. I mean, kind of similar thing, right? Is that like she's just a unit, she's just a big block of cheese. She just says burnout. I mean, that's it. She's the unit that says burnout and has very high stats, and it costs 1 ember and 2 space. Very low investment, huge stat stick, basically. That's always welcome, especially in like the early game. If you have any kind of burnout extension or reform, she can just do tons of damage to the bosses. Like Archeon, she could just stays alive forever and does a lot of damage. She's not really doing anything crazy, but it's just really solid all around to have. There's also the Lady Reformed. I think she's going in the same spot. It's more plausible to just kind of have her sit on a floor in this game, just have her collect revenge for her burnout. She's useful as a burnout extender on your floor. I would say she's not the greatest solution for that, because she still does cost 2 pip space, and she does kind of really want Titanite, like more than anything. So she's a little bit more finicky and picky, and her actual job of giving burnout is something that's like fulfilled more easily through other means, or with less resistance. Like, you don't need to invest 2 floor space into it if you just have like a holdover Wicklash or Purifying Cleanse or something. But she'll still work as a tank that can just get burnout. It's just that a lot of the time I don't really find myself needing that. Is almost why I'm kind of convincing myself maybe that's more consistent with the C tier. I'm going to put her in C. She's just not super useful most of the time. Next up, we have Lunar Priestess. I'm going to say A tier. She's a weird one. She's got like Cluster Kernel, right? Like we kind of talked about a little bit. She's an engine more than like an actual unit. I'd say that the thing is, the difference is between Cluster Kernel. She's way lower investment. She's only 1 ember and 1 space as opposed to 2 and 2. And I'd say that the function she fulfills is maybe a little bit more important. It gives Conduit, it gives Incant, it gives Moon Cycle. It just turns on so many of the strategies that Luna has. She single-handedly enables so many different things. The thing that's worse about her, though, than Cluster Kernel is that she's an 8/8. So if she's your opening unit in a Luna start, especially with Eka, you can be in trouble. That's really the only thing keeping her out of S tier for me. It's like, I think normally in most situations she is an S tier unit. She's just doing so much. She just gives so many things that the clan wants to do. Conduit, Moon Cycle, Incant, everything. It's just that she's really bad to start with. She's really weak early on. But she's an engine that just provides so much. Let's go Magmaller in B. He's an interesting one. He's just kind of he's one of those units that I think you're not going to be relying on as your long-term game plan, but he can absolutely help you get through the early game. If he's allowed to just kind of go to town on the boss, he'll get a ton of Pyrogel on them, and just makes killing the bosses so much quicker. But he's not going to be your carry unit per se later on, because he doesn't really scale that well through a lot of Pyroborn stuff. It's like having him be like a multi-strike carry or something is not exactly that feasible. And having him as a tank is not really super feasible either, because his base health is not super high and Pyroborn doesn't really have defense. But I'd say the main thing is that he pretty much guarantees your early game. You can give him a dualism, you can give him a lot of stuff. I mean, he takes a lot of stuff well, so that's always nice. It's just that he doesn't really do much after a certain point. He kind of really falls off. He's not a unit I really like to rely on at all. I just like to have him for the early game and just let him do his thing, and he performs pretty well. Let's go Morsel Maker in A. Same thing, this is just an engine. It is a 2 Ember, effectively 3 space unit. It's effectively 3 space. It's the main thing that I don't like about it, but it's a very low investment set and forget unit. Enables tons of morsel strategies, free passive scaling, 9/9 every turn. It's one of the main units I'm looking for when I'm playing Umbra. Just really helps you kind of get that morsel stuff going, the gorge going. The only thing is that for an engine unit, it's a little bit pricey. Next up we have the Morsel Master. I think it's going in C tier. That one's not really as useful. It's okay, but it's weird in that, like, it copies morsels, so like it only does stuff if you have morsel generation, so it doesn't really help you with the morsel generation problem like Morsel Maker can. If you have planks and you don't find any other morsels, it's like, this is not helping you actually generate morsels, it's just making more of them. But the problem is, if you can already make morsels, most of the time you can make quite a few morsels. So most of the time you don't really need to like duplicate them. It's weird. It's not really a super necessary unit most of the time, but it's like at its best with Morsel Maker. But it's very inferior in my opinion. Now we have Meat Hook. Meat Hook is an interesting one. He's a unit that I kind of really like to have around most of the time. But he's never really the star of the show, right? He's always just like solid, just kind of have. You can give him, if you don't know this, you can give him dualism, and it actually makes him apply daze too, which can be really good against like Dominion Seraph and stuff. It can be really, really useful to just stun the boss for like ever. If you have a 2 floor setup, it means the boss is going to come to his floor every other turn, which means that you can basically just keep the boss perma-stunned. You know, I'd say his biggest problems though is that he doesn't really like to have dualism, and he has pretty low stats to start with. He's very frail, and he's also not really doing that much otherwise other than just dazing, but most of the time that's enough. He's just kind of nice to have around, just apply daze, a good defensive unit, not winning you the run or anything, but just a good guy to have around. Meiser, C tier. Meiser can give you a ton of money. That's true. Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna give him B tier. He can give you a ton of money. His big problem is that he's really weak to start with, similar to Lunar Priestess. Really weak unit to start with. Really bad is just have an 8/8. You know, the money's not gonna help you to actually beat the boss on Ring 1. But he can give you so much money that like he makes up for it. And he's a unit that's like more niche, but still welcome a lot of the time, as long as you don't start with him in a really weak start. Moral Mistress. I'm going to put Moral Mistress in A tier. Super powerful unit. Really likes dualism. But super powerful. Super powerful. The problem is you do kind of need to build your deck around her, and she does really want dualism. So she's not like universal. But when she is good, she's really, really good. Just so much decay. You know, if you have to make sure you grab consume cards, which in Under Legion that generally isn't a big ask. Like if you see her early enough, a lot of the time it is easy enough to just kind of plan around her and build your deck around her, and it's usually worth it. It's just a very strong unit. A lot of decay. Just not as universal. There are certain scenarios where it just doesn't make sense to take her. You just don't have any consume. She's not doing anything for you. There's other choices that are better. But when she goes off, I mean, she goes off. Like, she goes crazy when you have a run with her actually going. Nightingale, D tier. This unit's bad. So it gains multi-strike on New Moon. The problem with that is that Luna's not a clan that really has trouble with getting enough hits in. You know, with all their spell slinging and stuff, they generally don't have problems with getting enough hits in. They have a problem with scaling their hits through attack damage. They can scale like through a conduit and stuff with spells, but having like a big heavy hitter is what they need, and this doesn't really help with that. This is just a very, very poorly statted unit that half of the time you're playing Eka and you don't have any moon cycle or the new moon room, so it's just a unit that is a 10-5 that has multi-strike every other turn. That's really bad. It really is just doing absolutely nothing a lot of the time. If you do have the new moon room, it can be good. But as far as the new moon units go, I mean, it's not solving any problems that you need to solve. Luna has no like in-clan way of actually scaling it. So it's extremely poor stats, or just like even more poor because you can't actually scale them. So yeah. Really don't like seeing this unit. Really hard to make it work. Just not doing enough. Plague Doctor is going into S tier. Really strong. It's like a pseudo sweeper in a way. It's a weird one. If you get her up to enough damage, she just kind of like does like tons of explosions. But usually she's just doing like 1 or 2 explosions. And she's just kind of like acting like some kind of like sweeper carry hybrid. It's a very weird and strange mechanic, but she definitely can be your carry. She does cost 2 Ember, so it does make it difficult to play more than 1, but she's only 1 space, which I always found interesting. I don't know why she's only 1 space. She's very strong for 1 space, but she does cost 2 Ember, so... yeah, and both the weapons and the mixes are good at scaling her. She needs less scaling than you would expect. She does want multi-strike, though. She really wants multi-strike. Her other problem is that her base stats are very low, but usually that's just offset so much by whatever else Lazarus is doing. Lazarus is just such a good clan. There's so many solutions to getting this unit out and online. And it's just a super dependable carry that you can almost always fit into a run. And Prickly Puffball, same sort of idea here in the S tier. This is a very self-sufficient unit most of the time. It's very similar to the Shark, right? The big difference is that it only applies the decay to the attacker, but on the flip side, it applies a lot more damage of decay. So it's better against bosses, also because generally Under Legion has better access to ways to keep it alive, like regen, loam coat. That it's much better against killing bosses, whereas the Shark is much better against the waves. Yeah, it's like the only annoying thing about Puffball is that like against like Kale, it's like not taking out the morsels because the morsels don't attack. And it just doesn't do any damage to something if it doesn't attack. So if you sap something, it won't do any damage. He is also not like super durable on his own. He can just like fall apart very quickly on Seraph if you're like not careful. You don't find Loam Coat. But he takes so many upgrades well. He takes Endless, Dualism, Titanite, Large Stone. You can even give him like the Regen 10 when he has Dualism, and it's Regen 20. That really helps get the ball rolling when you have Loam Coat. Just very high ceiling, and even his floor is like he's just like clearing backliners. Or at least clearing them in 2 waves most of the time. So high ceiling and pretty high floor too on this unit. Next we have the Sirens. I'm also going to put these in A. I think these are just totally fine bread and butter units. I think because of the Divinity Sweep being gone, that the Rage Siren is more appealing than she was. Like, it doesn't really matter that she doesn't gain health now, because she can just sit in the back. And really both the Sirens also got better because of Smidge Stone. So you can make a bunch of them, put them on the floor. The Rage Siren also uniquely benefits from the Dualism. So you can give her Dualism. So I think the Rage Siren has gotten a lot better. They also buffed them both, I think. It's Rage 3 and +3/+3 now, I think. So yeah, they're both very good now. I'd say the Siren of the Sea was usually better in the first game, but now it's a 50-50 split as to which one is better in any given situation. I mean, they're both very good now. I mean, they're both very good before, but they've kept up, is what I'll say. They both kept up. You know, they're bread and butter units for Stygian for Incant. Another unit that has kept up is Railbeater, who I am going to put in the S tier. I think that this unit is still just super strong. The melee weakness is really nice. You give him dualism now. It doubles his armor and it doubles the melee weakness. You give him dualism, multi-strike, and he can be your tank, he can be your carry. You know, very versatile unit. The only thing is that even with the dualism, it's like you do just still need to keep him alive. Like it's a lot of armor, but it's not that much. It will go down very quickly. Hellhorn does struggle a bit with defense, so that's kind of the only problem. But he is, I think, aged very well. He's still very good. Does a ton of damage. Takes dualism well, so he can be really tanky and deal a ton of damage. Yeah, really solid unit. Really like Railbeater. I will say that Selen Acolate is also S tier. This is a sweeper that does have in-clan ways to scale itself. That's the distinction. The Mage Blade. The Mage Blade scales it very nicely. There's a lot of ways to apply conduit. Not always. You know, there are some like Ekka runs where you don't get conduit Ekka, and you don't really get a lot of conduit, but most of the time, you know, there's like Moon Pixie and stuff like that. Like, there's a lot of things you can do to give conduit, and she can get the super high attack values with sweep. Her only problem is that she's very low base stats. That's true. That's her one problem. She can be very weak early on. You do need to get her some durability, or you need to have like some way to get like phase blessings out early. You know, but she's very strong sweeper, one of the strongest sweepers in the game. Has in-clan ways to scale herself. That's the distinction and why I think she's a cut above the other sweepers. The only thing is that the full moon is kind of tricky. There's some situations where you just can't really guarantee it's full moon every turn, and then she becomes weird and awkward. But usually just an incredibly solid, strong performer. Yeah, Silent Sentinel, D tier. It's an okay unit to have, especially in the early game, just because it's some much needed beef in Luna Coven's units. So many of them are so fragile that this one just, even though it doesn't really do anything, its effect is just not very useful most of the time. Just the fact that it has 40 HP is huge. Just something to sit in front and soak damage for a little bit. That's like its main purpose, is just to be there, to just be a tank. It's just a warm body that can just prevent some damage coming in. The spell weakness just does not matter at all. Most of the time. It's mostly just a big body that can act as a tank. Which is not super good, but sometimes it is a necessity. Sometimes it's exactly what you need. But the Shade Guard is just kind of a better tank. I'll put Shade Guard in A tier. This is a really strong unit to start with, especially. Just very high scaling on its own naturally, very set and forget. It is 2 Ember and 3 Space, so it's a little bit expensive, but you can give him Smidge, you can give him Multi, you can give him Titanite, he can be your tank, he can be your Spank. You know, just a very versatile unit. And passive scaling, too. That's another thing. Passive scaling. Just plop him somewhere and he just does his own thing. I've talked myself into S tier, I think. One of the most desirable units to start with. Guarantees relentless in the early game. And then in the late game, you can just dupe him a couple times, just have him sit somewhere, and he just grows passively without you need to interfere at all. Not much more you can ask for. That should say how good Greed Dragon is, by the way, because Greed Dragon is essentially the same thing. It's just he gets all the stats instantly. A unit that takes a few turns to ramp up to where Greed Dragon gets to is still S tier. That's how good Greed Dragon is. Anyway. Shadow Eater I put in... Yeah, I'll say B tier. He's sort of like a sweeper in a way, but he's kind of a worse one. You need to invest resources onto his floor, and he doesn't eat right away. So like you can never really be quick with him. He is tanky, so that's good. So you can kind of act as his own like tank for himself as a sweeper and as the tank. He's a little expensive to Ember, but main thing that makes him a little more niche is that he's not like doing it all for you. He's just kind of like softening up waves most of the time, unless then that's another problem is he is very dependent on morsels, and there's just certain runs where you just don't find the morsels you need. He can be very awkward against like silence units. You might not draw like morsels on your first turn a lot of the time. So he just kind of sits there and doesn't do anything, doesn't kill any waves on your first turn. It's like, come on. Like he just kind of sits there and takes a bunch of damage and you don't actually do anything to the wave. He's like an unreliable sweeper, but he's still a sweeper. So he's still at least going in the B tier. But a little bit less dependable. And as a speed, this unit just kind of sucks. I have one with it, but it's not doing anything that like a train steward can't do, a shield steward, other than it has quick. Which is nice for sure, but its stats are just super low. It doesn't have any in-clan way of scaling itself. It's only hitting once. It's just not really doing anything. I don't think this should be a contentious opinion. Just not a very useful unit. Very frail. Yeah, not good early game either. Just not helping you in bosses that much. It dies very quickly. Not great. Not the worst, but not great. I'm going to put our Spore Launcher friend in A tier. He can do like a sweeper's job almost, but he does require investment. He does want dualism, and you know, one of the big problems with Under Legion units is that so many of them are competing for dualism, and so few of them use like quick and multi-strike, and in fact none of them do. So that's just like a natural inherent penalty to Under Legion units, is that like they all want dualism. He's no exception. He also likes smidge. He also likes some way to keep himself alive. You'd ideally want to make more than one of him if you can and give him smidge. But he's very expensive. Not very expensive, but he's expensive. He's 2 Ember. And then you need to play like Rally on his floor to actually use him. So he does require some investment, but if you get him going, you know, Infectory is something he really likes. If you like Infectory, and you get him going, he can represent a lot of damage. One big problem he has is that even with like pretty decent rally capability, he a lot of the time still can't really deal with like the 500 damage gladiators or 500 health gladiators. He still can have like a hard time chewing through those tanks like a lot of Under Legion stuff can. But he works very well as like a sweeper sort of thing. He just does require some investment. But he can do more damage than a lot of the sweepers can naturally. I just don't think he's the most dependable, the most solid carry who's going to like solve a lot of the game on his own. Like, you do need to supplement him with other stuff, and you need to invest in him. Squad leader, D. This unit just doesn't really do that much. He's okay, I guess, in the early game at like weaponizing your stack a little bit, giving them trample, but in the late game, giving your stack trample is just not really doing anything. It mostly is not even chewing through gladiators with 500 HP, right? Your stack is usually maybe at like 200, maybe 300 at max most of the time. So the trample is just like not relevant. The attack is like not super relevant because you can't even trample through anyway. I just don't think he's very valuable most of the time. He's just not that important of a unit. He's not really helping you with any problems that the game presents. He's just giving your stack like a little bit of extra damage, which is the main purpose of your stack most of the time, is just to be a huge chump blocker and to just trigger harvests and stuff. It's not really meant to be like super weaponized. It just doesn't get the attack that high. So this guy's kind of useless in that regard. Like, he's kind of not a useful unit at all. He's just not doing nearly enough, I think. It's just not that useful. I'd love if he transferred his upgrades to your mushroom stack. That would be cool. Or if he like equipped, his equipment was like shared with your mushroom stack or something. Like, you can give your mushroom stack multi-strike and quick by giving him multi-strike and quick. Like, that would be really strong. I think he would be like pretty good if you do something like that, you know, where you like share weapons or something. But just giving him 2 attack per stack and trample is just not useful. It's just not really doing anything. Steadfast Crusader. I think I'm actually going to put him in C tier. He doesn't seem like he should be a C tier unit. Like, he just seems so weak on paper to me, but whenever I use him, he's like actually kind of decent. You know, he doesn't really want too many upgrades. He doesn't need too much. Just, he can even slap 2 plus 20 health on him and just have him on the floor. He can jump block a lot. He triggers shift on his own. He's just a vessel that you can add valor to. I mean, sure. Like, he's helping. He's not as useless as I would really expect him to be. He's not really like great either. He's just a pretty underwhelming unit, but he's not bad. He's not like really bad. He's just kind of meh. He's not really the unit you want to see out of Banish. He's not really helping you that much. Stats aren't really that great, especially in the early game. But he's like fine to have around a lot of the time. You can use him. He's pretty low impact, but he's also a bit low investment. Low floor, low ceiling. Steelworker, C. I just don't think, you know, what I said about armor, I just don't think Steelworker really keeps up. Even with dualism, it's like he's still just so frail. You can't use him as a tank. He just has such low HP. So you gotta kind of put him in the back, and it's like, now he's taking up 2 space on your floor, and he's basically just a totem. Like, the fact that you can't infuse him into stuff anymore really hurts him. Even with dualism, it's like, it's still just not that much armor. Again, it's armor to your whole floor, which is just not that useful. I'd much rather have armor to my front guy, like a welder helper. Like, that's way better than a steelworker, in my opinion. He's just like a 2-space totem that's AoE defense, but even with dualism, it's like not giving you enough defense to your front guy. I just don't think he's very good. Unfortunately, he just doesn't keep up. Sword Maiden, I'm going to say also C tier. This unit is only really great when you have Lazarus weapons. That's great. Otherwise, it's pretty underwhelming. at the very least, it is a good amount of stats for the early game. It does draw a weapon for you also, which can definitely be nice to save you from deployabling something. It's just kind of a similar idea to the Steadfast Crusader, though, where it's just like a very low floor, low ceiling unit. It's just not really doing that much, but it's not bad most of the time. It's just not very impactful. It's very good when you have the erratic assistance, and you're just playing the assistant on the floor and then getting the weapon, and then the Valor gets pretty crazy. But even with that, it's still not like that good. It's just like pretty good. Yeah. So definitely not my favorite unit, but it's fine. Next up we have Thorn Hollow, A-tier unit. It's kind of reverse from how it was in Monster Train 1 with the Awoken Hollow, where Thorn Hollow is much more desirable to me now. Main reason why he's so much better is that he doesn't need to like solo the run anymore. Because you can just put him on his own floor and heal him, and he can almost act like a sweeper on his own. He can also be a really good relentless solution. He's very strong in the early game, and he can even hold his own later on too. The only thing is that he does need a lot of investment. You do need to pump those heals into him, and he really does want dualism, but not a requirement. There's other ways to weaponize spikes. You know, there's the one that makes spikes deal more damage per stack. There's the Thorned Channeler. There's a couple ways to get him going. And he's very strong in the early game. Very good boss killer. Really dependable and solid unit. Now, one of my probably my most desired unit when I have restores. Okay, next up we have the Paraffin Thug. I'm going to put him in the B tier. He's actually a lot better now. He can get you a lot of money. He gives 30 gold per slay now. So, especially in the early game, he's going to get a few slays, and he's going to represent a lot of money. I've even used him as my carry. You know, just give multi-strike and burnout and use him with like a paraffin, that's fine. Like, the main appeal is that he's just going to give you a lot of money. And he does a lot of damage. So, he's not like carrying the run as it goes on in a way that any other unit couldn't, but he's just really solid to have. I really don't mind him. Really solid unit. Much better now, but not like a huge part of your run most of the time. Okay, next up we have Test Subject Alpha. And I kind of covered him earlier when I was talking about Hothead next to him. Kind of gave him the shaft a little bit, but yeah, he definitely is a sweeper that says quick. I mean, that's very good. You know, Hothead is a little bit better. Hothead also says multi-strike. But the thing is with Test Subject Alpha is that Test Subject Alpha is in Lazarus, which is a much better clan, which we can't forget. And Lazarus has things like Organ Harvester, which, you know, if you give Organ Harvester this guy, he basically lives forever. He just gets so much reanimate. You know, he has rage from the mixes. He has weapons. You know, even something like a Twisted Back is awesome on him. Very versatile, very brainless, easy, straightforward unit to use. Just very, very solid. I don't think I need to really go into that much detail, right? I mean, he's just very, very good. A lot of tools in Lazarus to turn him online. Very straightforward, easy, fun, relaxing. Now we have the Tycoon. He's kind of similar. Just a very solid money maker. Just stick him on a floor, put a bunch of dregs in front of him or tombs, and just sit back and relax and collect your money. Yeah, not much else to say. I mean, he rather than the slays, he gets it on the harvest. I'm not sure which of them makes more money between him and the Thug, but they both make a lot of money. And they're both absolutely worth adding to your deck most of the time. They're just not going to, like, carry the game for you. But just great money makers. And that brings us to the Animus of Will. It's our last one. I am actually going to put the Animus of Will in the B tier. Another bit of a fall from grace. Unfortunately, the lack of infusions does really hurt it. It was a lot of the time that you were taking it for its infusion of just multi-strike and minus 15 attack. Now you have to use it its own unit. Now it is nice that it's a vessel for a lot of scaling, but the problem is that, again, Awoken just doesn't really have any great ways to scale it. You know, Awoken Hollow sucks now. You have like a razor sharp edge, which is like not doing as much as it was. It's also very fragile. You know, they did buff its health a little bit, but it still really wants some health. And it needs the scaling, and it's only 3 strikes, so it's not doing like a ton. So it's like, it's more niche. It's harder to get it going, but you can still absolutely use it as your carry. It's just not as good now. I think it's really hurt by the lack of infusions. So that's it. That's my tier list. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, if you agree, what I get right, what I get wrong. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you thought this was fun. Until next time, peace.